great. All right, so my name is Rachel, and I am the Public Affairs Specialist here in San Diego with DEA. So I'm going to talk to you guys about some drug threats that we're seeing here in San Diego, especially what's facing youth. So, like was mentioned, I work a lot with students. I used to go into schools and do big assemblies with a lot of students. The whole gym I would talk to and get a lot of feedback from students about what drugs they're using, because when they're in a big crowd, they'll yell things out at me and tell me things that what's trending, but over Zoom, I can see their face when they talk, right? They pop up. So I don't get that current feedback as much right now, unfortunately, because it is actually, I get a lot of really good information about what's being used by youth in those settings. So anyway, I'm going to talk to you guys about that, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the stuff that I talk to the students about, but give you a little bit more background. So obviously my background is in science with a medicinal chemistry PhD. So the way that I approach the students is not from the law enforcement perspective, even though I am with DEA. So I like to talk to them about how drugs affect their brain. Why do we want them to say no to drugs, right? We can't just tell them to say no to drugs. We've taught these students that they need to ask more questions and get more information and do things with an informed reason for things. So we need to teach them why. So you guys know this, I'm not going to go too much into this, but drug use hijacks your natural reward system. So no matter what drug we're talking about, that natural reward system is hijacked. And so that's the dopamine pathway. So thinking is affected, decision-making, judgment. And in order to, a lot of times people who have become addicted to a drug need to take that drug in order just to feel normal. So I show this graphic a lot. I really like it because it shows kind of the baseline mood. And obviously we have good days and bad days, right? But for the most part, people are around this baseline mood. And again, this is how I describe it to parents, to students. I think it's important for them to understand how these drugs can affect them and how drugs can actually change their brains, and it's not just a moral failing to be addicted to drugs, right? This is something that is changing the way their brains are functioning. So you take the drug, you feel high, but your brain obviously is working really hard to keep you back at that baseline, get you back there. That drug leaves your body and you end up lower than baseline, right? So after that first high, you have a big low. Your brain's going to get you back to that baseline. And after taking that drug multiple times, the way I describe it to kids is, hey, your brain is working really hard to do a lot of other things, right? To keep your whole body working. And why would your brain keep working to keep you at that baseline when you just keep putting drugs in that same job that's bringing you back up? So your brain says, okay, that's a job that I don't have to do. That's a job that now these drugs are going to do. So especially when we know that teen brains aren't done developing until the mid-20s, right? So they're training their brains to need that drug in order to function. And what we know is that people who, at least 95% of adults who have an addiction, who seek treatment for some sort of addiction, started using some substance before the age of 25. And so that's huge. That's why I work so much with students talking about this, is because we want these students to have the knowledge to be able to protect their brains for their future. And I know that's part of why you guys do what you do. So let's talk a little bit about the drug trends that we're seeing here in San Diego. The 2018 numbers are what I have as most current. 2019 is coming out in, I believe, 2 weeks, so we're almost there. But in 2018, close to 600 people just in San Diego County died from some substance, and that includes people under the age of 25. Now, you guys have all heard of fentanyl, and I do have 2020 numbers, and you can see this huge increase in fentanyl deaths. And this, we can attribute it to COVID, to people being at home, to using drugs more on their own. But fentanyl, first of all, is an opioid. It's very deadly, just a lot stronger than heroin. We'll talk about that. But we're seeing this huge increase in fentanyl deaths. And while fentanyl is a prescription that you can get, these deaths are not from people who have gotten a prescription. These are from illicit fentanyl use. And so we're seeing this huge increase in illicit fentanyl. And a lot of these people who are overdosing don't know that they're taking fentanyl. And that's because we see that the drug cartels are selling fentanyl as disguised as any drug, mixed in with any drug, because they make so much money off of it. So you can see this huge increase. So in 2018, we were saying, wow, we have this huge increase. 92 people died from fentanyl. And then 2019, we said, we almost doubled that at 150. And now, just in 9 months in 2020, we're close to 300 people have died from fentanyl. And that's huge. And so we've done a lot of the law enforcement agencies in San Diego have put out a lot of press releases. We're trying to get that information out, but it's really important for everyone to know. So we want you guys to be aware of the fentanyl that we're seeing here. And a lot of times, so I'll show you some pictures of what the fentanyl that we're seeing here looks like. But I don't have to tell you guys what an opioid is, right? Opioids like morphine, hydrocodone, oxycodone are prescriptions. But those prescriptions can be addictive, just like heroin, because heroin is an opioid, right? Heroin, fentanyl, those are all opioids. So the way I describe it to teenagers is your brain has a switch that says this is an opioid, and it turns on the opioid switch. So whether they get that prescription opioid from you as their doctor, whether they get it from their friend's medicine cabinet, their friend's mom got it from her doctor and they got it from their friend, or whether they get heroin, right? All of those get in their brain and they say opioid, the switch goes on. And so it's important for them to understand how addictive those drugs can be. It's important for you guys to have that conversation if you are prescribing an opioid of things to be careful to look for, making sure that you're not using it more than it's prescribed, right? You guys know all the things about prescribing opioids. Make sure the parents need to be looking for making sure that those teenagers aren't using it more often, more frequently, or refilling it without the parents' knowledge, those types of things. So that's the prescriptions. We're also seeing these fake prescriptions, that fake pills that look like they're prescriptions. So a lot of times people think they're getting a prescription that came from a pharmacy, but it's actually a fake pill. And the reason we're seeing those fake pills is all about the money for cartels, right? So heroin and these pills, hydrocodone, oxycodone, these all come from the poppy plant. Now, fentanyl, which is the drug on the last slide that had that huge increase that we're seeing right now, is totally synthetic. It's just made in a lab with chemists. You don't need the poppy field. You don't need someone to go out and collect the plant material. You just need a chemist in the lab. And so they can make a lot more money off of fentanyl than they make off of heroin or pills that they get from the pharmacy. So think about getting pills from pharmacies. We've done a really good job of cutting down on prescriptions of those pill mills where people were, doctors were selling prescriptions. We're getting those bad doctors out. And thankfully, we've gotten a lot more education and research on the dangers of these prescriptions. So you guys as the medical community have done a great job of cutting down the prescription opioids. And so that's not out there as much. So then we had people who were addicted to these drugs who then moved on to heroin because heroin's cheaper. And it also, remember, it flips the same switch. And then the cartels said, hey, Americans like white powders for drugs. They don't like black tar. They like white powders, and we can make fentanyl for a fraction of the cost of heroin, and we can sell it to 100 to 1,000 more people. If we look at how strong these drugs are, prescription opioids are strong drugs, right? Heroin is 50 to 100 times stronger than those. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. And then carfentanil is not something you can write a prescription for unless you're a veterinarian, right? Carfentanil is actually used to tranquilize elephants. And so it's a super strong drug. It's about 1,000 times more potent than fentanyl. And carfentanil is made just the same way that fentanyl is, in a lab. So when the cartels switch up the ingredients a little bit, they make these analogs of fentanyl, and they can be really, really deadly. So we have had some carfentanil deaths here in San Diego. Thankfully, we haven't had very many. So again, it's all about the money for drug cartels selling these things, and that's what they're doing. They're pushing these drugs that they can make really cheaply, and they can also sell to a lot more people because it's a lot stronger. And so, you know, a lot of people we know started out with a prescription drug and moved up that chain, like we talked about. So fentanyl, I told you guys we're seeing a lot of fentanyl deaths here, and the fentanyl that we're seeing in San Diego is actually, it comes in the form of a pill usually. It looks like a pill that's a pharmaceutical, but it's not. It's a fake pill. And you can see on this penny the white powder. That is a deadly dose of fentanyl. That's 2 milligrams. And 2 milligrams is not enough to make a pill. A pill has a little bit more than 2 milligrams of volume. So what drug cartels are doing is they're taking a white powder, some sort of powder, adding in fentanyl, and then they mix it together. And these are not pharmaceutical grade labs. These are not quality controlled labs. These are usually somebody's garage in a 5-gallon bucket, mixing it up, and then they put it through a pill press. And you guys can see the difference here in these pills. So some of these have no fentanyl, and some have, you know, 10 deadly doses of fentanyl. So I like to show this picture to parents and students to remind them that you can't tell the difference, right? These are all white powders. All these pills look the same. And now we're seeing fentanyl mixed in with pretty much everything. So we've had cases in San Diego where 2 people, they go to their dealer, they get some pills, they go home, they each take a pill. And one person gets, you know, this pill with a dose or 2 of fentanyl, and the other person gets a really deadly pill, and they both take the pill. They think they're taking the same thing. It's from the same dealer, the same batch, everything. And one person dies and one person lives. And that's what, you know, they both thought they were doing the same thing. They were taking the same thing that they've always taken, or they've been using, or the same thing that they, you know, they thought they were both taking the same thing. So we're finding this fentanyl mixed in with pretty much everything, with heroin, with pills that are popular in high school. So the cartels know what the high school students are looking for, and college students, and now as young as middle school students are looking for these drugs. So they make Xanax pills. They're making these prescription opioid pills that look like hydrocodone or oxycodone or Adderall pills. They're mixing it in with methamphetamine. They're mixing it in with cocaine. We hear reports that it's mixed in with marijuana as well. I don't have lab reports to show that, but that also has to do with the fact that we don't test all the marijuana that we seize. So that's kind of where we're seeing fentanyl. I'm going to show you guys some pictures of pills. If you guys want to play along with my game, you can use your little buttons at the bottom to give me a wave or a thumbs up, or you can just give a thumbs up or wave on the computer. So if you guys can see these pictures, can you tell which one is real? Which one is the real Beyonce? Can anybody tell a wave or a thumbs up? All right, I see a wave. Yep, so that one's pretty easy. The Nike, can you guys tell which one is really a Nike? Yep, so that is the Nike is the thumbs up is real. All right, what about the Percocet? Can you tell which one is real? So one of these came from a pharmacy, and one has fentanyl in it. All right. Yeah, so this one came from a pharmacy. This one has fentanyl. All right, what about Xanax? Xanax is really popular with high school students. And you can tell these Xanax looks pretty similar. Which one came from a pharmacy? Any guesses? So this one is actually Xanax, and this one is actually fentanyl. Oxycodone, anybody? Oops, too fast. We'll do another oxycodone. What do you guys think about this one? Which one came from the pharmacy? So these are both fake. I always like to include this one so nobody says I passed the DEA's test so I can go to the party and I can decide which pill is right. These are M30s or the blues. These are the most common pills that we're seeing in San Diego. These are oxycodone pills, or they are supposed to be oxycodone pills. They look like oxycodone pills, but they're actually filled with fentanyl. And we see bags and bags, kilos of these pills, and coming up from Tijuana to here. So this is something I tell parents, if you see a pill like this, if you guys get a call from a parent about a pill like this, it is more than likely fentanyl. If someone in their family doesn't directly have an oxycodone prescription, these are very, very, the most common pills that we see here in San Diego are these types of pills. Okay, so we're going to move on to marijuana. So first of all, hopefully you guys know that marijuana is not legal for kids. And there are a lot of high school students that don't recognize that. And then the two main ingredients in marijuana are THC and CBD. So THC is that component that makes you high, and CBD is what's studied for its medicinal properties. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the plants today are not actually medicinal because they have been bred or genetically modified to have very little CBD and really high THC content. So plants today can have anywhere between 20 and 30% THC, whereas 20, 30 years ago, they were 3 or 4% THC. But students today and high school students, when I talk to them, tell me, nobody's smoking the plant. Why would you even put this up there? Because everybody's using the concentrates, the hash, the oil, the shatter. These are concentrates, and they're 90 to 95% THC in some cases. And this is what they're vaping. They're vaping straight THC pretty much. And so that is pretty scary because a lot of times they think, well, or a lot of times parents think, well, I smoked some when I was, when I was in high school, but they were smoking like 3 or 4% THC. And now their kids are smoking 90% THC, and they were smoking probably once or twice on the weekend, and these kids are smoking once or twice a day. So it's that really potent THC increases your addictive. The addiction happens much quicker, and a lot of the negative effects happen much more quickly too. Today we also have edibles. So these are food products with THC baked into them. The state of California requirements or rules say that an edible is supposed to be a single serving is 10 milligrams of THC. I'll also remind you that according to federal law, all of these are illegal. All THC marijuana use is illegal, and that's who I work for, DEA. We are in California, so this is what the students know, and so this is what your patients are going to be telling you or know about, and this is what they have access to. So a single serving is 10 milligrams, but in the state of California, a package can have 10 servings. So that's 100 milligrams of THC, or basically 20 hits of marijuana at one time. Or unless you eat 1/10 of a package, right? And again, I like to tell the kids, how many of you guys have had a candy bar? And how many of you guys ate 1/10 of that candy bar at a time? Or just the arm off of the gummy bear, right? This is a big problem. And it's especially important to remember how marijuana affects your body. So that THC, when you smoke it, you feel that high more immediately, and it wears off more really quickly. Whereas in edibles can take 2 to 4 hours. So we see people taking a lot of it because they don't realize that dosage unit, but they also, or they don't know that it's an edible. And then we see poisonings because of that. We're seeing an increase in marijuana visits to the emergency room. I talked to some emergency room doctors, and these are some of the things that they're seeing. I know I've talked to some of you on this call already about some of the marijuana use and issues that you've seen in youth. So I won't go through this too much, but psychosis, hallucinations, paranoia, panic attacks. Remember, we're talking about really high THC content and usually really frequent THC use. So regular marijuana use, and again, students tell me regular use is once or twice a day of that 90% THC, whereas these studies were looking at 2 to 4 times a week. So stroke, heart disease, lung disease, cancers, and then all of these mental health problems. this is a big one that's overlooked. A lot of times people think you have anxiety, so take marijuana, it'll calm you down. That THC will calm you down, but actually that high THC increases anxiety. So let's get a little bit into vaping, because I know that's a big one. If you don't know, Juul pods have about a pack and a half worth of cigarettes, about 25 cigarettes. And kids, we're going through these about a day and a half. That's kind of the average for a Juul pod. So 25 cigarettes in a day and a half worth of nicotine. So it's called a vapor, but it's called vaping, right? So it's supposed to be a vapor, but it's actually an aerosol. They call it a vapor to make it sound better. That aerosol has, all these nasty chemicals, whether it's nicotine, marijuana, or other drugs. We found vape devices here in San Diego that have other drugs in them. We know people can vape fentanyl, people can vape meth. And I'm not saying that that's very common. We have seen all of those, but the most common is for marijuana or nicotine. And now with COVID, we are in a pandemic with lung injury, respiratory illness, and we still have vaping going on that damages your lungs. So we know that vaping damages your lungs and increases your likelihood for a negative progression, negative outcome with COVID. In addition to COVID, there's E-Valley and other vaping lung illnesses. And so this is a kid who was 18. He had been vaping for like a year and a half. He had just been using that Juul, the name brand vape device, and his lung collapsed. And so he posted about his experience. They were able to, reinflate his lungs. They were able to get him back to being healthy with these black spots on his lungs. So he posted this onto Snapchat for other students to hopefully pay attention and realize that, hey, this isn't as safe as they're telling us it is. Because they are saying it's safe, right? They're saying that smoking is better than vaping, vaping is better than smoking. But studies show that for every one adult who quits cigarettes using vaping, about 80 teens who would never have started smoking become regular nicotine consumers through e-cigarettes. And so this is, we know that these students would never have started smoking cigarettes. We've done a really good job of teaching our youth that that smoking is bad. And so now they've gotten this market through vaping. So real quickly at the end, I just want to make sure that you guys all are aware of Narcan or naloxone. This is an opioid antagonist, so it's going to reverse the effects of opioids like fentanyl, the opioid prescription drugs, and heroin. Fentanyl, I like to tell everybody, if you think that someone is using any type of drug, and it's important that you know that you can use Narcan if they overdose, because Narcan's not going to hurt someone, right? It's an antagonist. It's not going to hurt them if they overdose on something that's not an opioid. But if they did take, say they got a Xanax pill, right? Xanax a benzo. So Narcan would not revive someone who had taken a Xanax, unless that Xanax was from a drug dealer, which was filled with fentanyl. And then that Narcan can revive that person and wake that person up, save their life. So it's also important when if you're teaching someone about Narcan, that they know that they still need to call 911, because we've seen people who've had so much fentanyl in their system that they've had to have 8 or 9 doses of Narcan, or Narcan wears off in your body after about an hour, where fentanyl can last 4 to 6 hours. So these people can re-overdose without taking any more drug. So this is something, if you know of someone who is using drugs of any kind, it might be worth writing them a prescription or mentioning it. They don't have to have a prescription to pick it up from the pharmacy. They can buy it. But I have heard that for some insurances, it is cheaper, much cheaper to buy it, get it with a prescription. All right, and I'm going to quickly show you a video of someone who's overdosing, and this man is overdosing on heroin. So he is, let me make sure that. So he is not breathing. So his respiratory depression, he's not responding. So the paramedics are going to give him Narcan. And you'll see that he does start breathing pretty quickly. And this is him talking. Oh, sorry. Okay. Hopefully you were able to see that. I see some of you telling me there's not any sound, but what you could see is that he was not breathing and they injected into his nose and he started breathing again. And if you could have heard, he was saying that he got prescribed an opioid prescription during playing high school football, and then he couldn't get his prescription anymore. He started using heroin because it was cheaper, and that's how he ended up using heroin. So another thing that I like to remind students of, especially, is the Good Samaritan law. So I would tell them, if you're at a party and you're using, and someone's overdosing, call for help. And this law will protect you from getting into trouble as long as you're trying to save that person's life. And that's all I have. I have some resources here. I'm gonna type this long site into the chat for you. This is a website that I update regularly with a lot of different drug resources. There's a great section on a lot of DEA resources that we have for parents and families. So I'm going to add that into the box and you guys can see that. We also have Red Ribbon Week coming up next week. So we have a lot of resources for schools and students if that's something that you're interested in. So thank you guys so much.